Hey there everybody, Decaf here from YSFlight with part 2 of my animation tutorial. Today we're actually going to look at how we animate something. What are the steps that we need to take? First, what we need to do is get a little bit of background information. Now, we did a lot of background and fundamental things last time, but today I want to go in and really nitpick on some details that we're going to need to know for actually animating. And there's three main things that we need to know. And I've opened up D&M Viewer here to really highlight those three things, because in Blender they're sort of hidden and there's a lot of other layers that Blender introduces that sort of overshadows what we're doing here. So YSFlight, we need to know how to map our commands given in YSFlight, like landing gear down, put our flaps down, those types of things, to the animations. How do we link those two? The way we do it is with a CLA. Don't know what that actually stands for, but it's what we deal with. And we can assign numbers, or if we're lazy, we can just select, okay, yeah, we want the afterburner, and that'll give us a CLA of 2. There's a list on YSFlight Wiki that goes through all the CLAs. It tells us exactly what they are there, and it's a very good resource to go check out. The next thing that we're going to need to look at, number 2, is our position. Now, everything in this model has a position that we need to work with, whether it's the launch rails, the canopy for the cockpit, the elevators, whatever. Everything has a position, so naturally we're going to get everything lined up properly. That's probably the first thing we're ever going to do, but we need to have a position. Next, we have something called an STA, and what that really means is what are the maximums, minimums, and give me some boundary conditions for this animation. I think the best way to highlight this is with our rudder. So let me go and take a look at our rudder here. With our rudder, we have 3 STAs, or 3 major positions that YSFlight needs to know. So first we have, as you can see here, neutral, N, where if we're not touching our joystick, this is exactly how it's going to look. Next we have left, which is a full left turn. And then we have right, which is full right turn. So we have 3 major positions that YSFlight needs to know. All the other information is just gathered as, okay, it's linearly somewhere in the middle between those two, depending on how much I'm steering with my joystick or my keyboard or my mouse. So those are the 3 basic fundamental things that we need to understand about YSFlight animation. So let's go and talk about this in Blender. Okay, so in Blender, let's talk about some correlations that we're going to need to understand going in between what we just talked about and actually working inside of Blender to get where we want to go. The first thing that we need to understand is what the STAs are going to be. Now, remember back to last time we talked about frames and keyframes and all sorts of funny things like that. Well, we're going to use our keyframes and frames to define our STAs. Now, if we just press the up arrow key, we jump 10 frames. And this is what we like to use as keyframes, because it's really simple. 1, 11, 21, 31, etc. Those are what our STA points are going to be in terms of the frames. And we'll talk about this a little bit more when we're actually going and animating our rudder. But just keep that in the back of your mind. The keyframes are going to be just pressing up on our arrow key, and then the left and right, we're going to be able to cycle through the animation, seeing, okay, how is this exactly going? Because it's going to look exactly like this in YSFlight. Is this how I want? Is it rotating around the correct axis? Things like that. Now, the CLAs and the positions, well, the position is already taken care of because we just moved everything in the right spot, but we're going to have to set it up a little bit differently from just what we talked about in the last video. The way our CLA is going to be selected is through the D&M animation script. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we do that. What we're going to need to do is go down here and click on the little button window icon and select script window. And if you just opened up Blender and you haven't run a script yet, this is what you'll see. If you have run a script like the poly selection or replace a color or something, you'll see that script here. Now, you can quickly go back to the button window if we need to go into edit mode or something like that by pressing this arrow key right here. That'll bring us back. It goes return to previous window. If we ever need to get back to the script window, we just click on our button, go back to script window. Now what we need to do is go and select the correct script. What we need to do is go Object, D&M View. Really simple. And here we have our STAs where we can select everything. We can select, okay, is this going to be a visible STA? Is it not? Is it going to be horizontal, vertical? That's just our orientation right here. We have our CLAs that we can just type in a number, or we can just select what we're going to be using from here. Now this is a fairly old script. I think at this point it's almost 4 years old. So there's some CLAs that are not in here. And what you can do is just go ahead and type in the CLA, like 30, and you'll come up with whatever that is. In this case, it's nav lights. I'm just throwing out an example here. So you can type in a CLA, or you can select it from within this list. These are some of the major things that we're going to be working with. So first, before we even get to this, what we're going to need to do is set up our model so that it's all set to go. And there's two things that we need to consider. Number one, is this going to be rotated around a non-global axis? And number two, does this need a empty so that I can parent a whole bunch of things together and move everything together? Now, a bunch of these guys are not going to need CLAs specifically for the task of animating, but they will need them for moving the animations around. Quick example, these elevators back here, if we look down from the top, they're perfectly in line with the y-axis, and therefore we're not going to need a empty to rotate that around. On the other hand, our rudder definitely is going to need to be rotated with a CLA and animated with one. An empty, because it is definitely at an angle here, as you can see. Some other things like these landing gear, because they're just going to be moving along global axes, rotating around them, we don't actually need a empty there. But if we need to move things around, it's very, very handy to just have all three of these guys with CLAs, empties, parented together and just movable as one direct object. Sort of like our tail animation in the 737. So let's talk about how we're going to set up our tail here, because we got to get this going. Now you may think, okay, we'll just snap in an empty and we'll rotate it to the right position and then we'll parent it really quick and easy. Not so fast there, guys. What we need to do is get this mesh right here centered around the origin, and we need to get it there and rotated so that when we insert our empty, the empty is in line with the global axes, the mesh is in line with the global axes. We parent them together and then we just bring it right back into position and rotate it. So here's how we're going to do that. What we're going to do first is select these two guys, because that's where I want to put my empty to rotate things around. So I'm going to snap my cursor there, and I'm going to center my object. I'm going to hit the end window and I'm going to snap this guy to 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to go ahead right now and isolate it with the / key. Now we just have our rudder. And what we're going to do is look at it from the side, and we're going to rotate this such that the axis that we want to rotate around is in line with our blue z-axis right here. Now we can just fiddle around with this, get it approximate, and it looks like maybe around 16, 15 degrees, something like that. So I'm going to call this 15.5 degrees just for real simple. Our 15.5 degrees. And that was a positive rotation. So when we're all done with this, this is going to have to come back for our negative rotation, setting up with our animation. So now we need to get this guy back around to the origin. We're going to select these two guys down there again, snap our cursor there, center our object, and then snap this guy back to 0, 0, 0. Now we're going to bring our cursor right back. We're going to bring cursor to selection, and now we're ready to add in our empty. So what we need to do, this is very important, is look at it from the top down view, and then we're going to hit space, add empty, and there's our empty. And right now I'm going to name it rud empty, just so I know what it is. So if I have 20, 30, 100 empties, I want to know exactly what this is. So an effective name, rud empty, really says, okay, this is probably for the rudder. Let's see what's going on here. Now we're going to parent our child, which is the rudder, to our empty, Control P, and then we can actually go ahead and rotate this back, RY minus 15.5. Now when we look at it from the side, okay, that's all set. Now we're ready to bring this out of isolation and we're going to need to go in and select just our empty. Well, it's kind of hard to see it right now. It's in the middle of the model. So we're going to go to wireframe and select just our empty. And then we're going to snap the selection to our cursor, because our cursor in this overall global picture never moved. When we isolated just the rudder, we had sort of a local cursor that we were working with. So this is a really simple way to do that. Another way that you can do this is insert an empty right there to begin with, just to mark your location, or you can look over here and record these numbers down so you know where to snap things back to. So now let's do a quick check to make sure this is rotating where we want it to. So we're going to press RZZ because we're rotating around the parent objects, or the empties here, Z-axis. And we can see that, yep, that's rotating around the Z-axis. And we're all set to animate. So let's keep this selected. We're going to go to our script window, and there we go. Here is our DNM view. And now we're going to go View, Space Handler Scripts, Show Object.py. And now we have this available to us. We're going to select our CLA that we want, and we're going to select rudder. And notice that just snapped right to number 8, exactly how we want it. So we're going to need 3 STAs, or 3 keyframes, to fully animate this model. And we need to do neutral, left, and then right, just like a DNM viewer showed us. All right. So let's go ahead and press I to insert the insert key menu here. And we're going to want to select rotate, because we're only rotating this object. If we were moving and rotating, we'd select location rotation. And if we were scaling, rotating, and moving it, we'd do all 3. And you can see how this is going to go. So we're just going to hit rotate, because this is the neutral STA that we're inserting, the first STA or keyframe. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to rotate it, nothing. We inserted our keyframe nice and pretty. So then we're going to go up 10 frames. We're going to go ahead and rotate this, RZZ, and typically 30 degrees is about what's used. It depends on what you want to do. I'm just going to go ahead and do negative 25 degrees. Hit return. Make sure that I'm not rotating anymore. That's all selected. I'm at frame 11. I'm going to go ahead and hit I again and select rotate. That is our full left turn STA that we just inserted. Now we're going to do the same procedure. We're going to hit up. We're going to rotate this to the full right turn position, RZZ 50, to go 25 back to neutral and then 25 degrees further. Then we're going to go ahead and hit I, rotate again. And now we can make sure that this actually worked. So we can see, yep, that rotated just fine. Now you may look and see, okay, well, that doesn't look quite rotated around the Z-axis if you look really far in and you see some wavering at the top of your thing that's rotating. This is just little inaccuracies of how I was setting up the rotation. The more detail that you pay attention in rotating your mesh at the very beginning before you parent it to the empty, the better this is going to look. So I've got some models where I just was like, let me just derp around real quick, and it looked terrible. The more effort you put in, the better it's going to look. So now let's go ahead and take a look at these guys down here. Now these guys, we don't need an empty to animate these. So what we can do is just center our cursor right where we want the axis to go through, because these are parallel to the global axes, or the Y axis, which is highlighted in green right here. So we're going to snap our cursor there, and then we're going to hide our script right now because we don't need it. We're going to hit center cursor, and now we're ready to begin animation. So how is this going to animate? What it's actually going to do is do neutral, up, down. Very simple. Let's go ahead and go back to our script window. We have our DNM view script right here. And notice that this snapped back to 0, bodies or gears. It doesn't know exactly what we're doing here. So we have to go back in and make sure this is right. Now, one thing that you can do is overlap your keyframes in Blender. So for example, you can have your rudder and elevators going at the exact same time. But that's not always the easiest way to do this. You might want to isolate certain animations to be only going at a certain time and not overlapping with others. You can do pretty much whatever you want. So what I recommend doing, just for beginners, just when you're first starting out, before you get real comfortable, is separating these guys out. So as soon as one animation ends, the other one's beginning. So if we go up to frame 21, we can see that this is the very tail end of that animation, and now we can add in the neutral for this guy. So we're going to go rotate, and that's that. But hold on, oh no, I forgot to move my CLA to the right thing. Well, that's okay. What I can do is just at any time go back, select elevator, and we can just overwrite that just like that. Really straightforward and simple. And then we're going to go up one more keyframe, rotate around the y-axis, let's say 20 degrees, insert our keyframe, go up one more, RY minus 40 degrees, and there we go. That is all we need to do. Now you could cheat this a little bit and make both of these guys the exact same mesh. That would save a little bit of animation time because you'd only have to animate one thing for your elevators. This only works when naturally it's just an elevator. If you're mixing your elevators and your aileron controls or something like that, you'll have a little bit of different things going on there. That's a little bit more complicated, but you can take a look at the tutorial that Vincent Webb published. Down below I have a link. You can see what he's done and how he did that. So there we go. We're just going to follow the same procedure here. Center our cursor, and now we're ready to animate this guy. We are at frame 21. We're all set to go. So let's go back to our script frame. Let's make sure that our space handler script is still active. It is, because we still got the check there. And we're going to go ahead and select elevator. Hit the keyframe, because that's the neutral one. Go up one more. RY 20 degrees up. Go down, RY minus 40 degrees. And there we go. Let's take a look. Yep, that's animating perfectly. So that basically covers what we need to do there. We have two different things that we can do. We have animations that need the empties, and we have animations that don't necessarily need the empties. So it really depends on what you're doing. If you're rotating around non-global axes, you absolutely need your empties. If you don't, well, you don't actually totally need them. But if you're trying to move them around, like a tail animation or something like that, maybe it would be a good idea to add in those empties, parent everything together, and then you'll be able to animate things quite nicely. Okay, so I went ahead and I animated the landing gear here. And what I did was I just went and animated the landing gear without any empties or anything like that. And then I went in and added the empties later, just to show you that you can actually do it this way. And then I went ahead and made a parent-child relationship between this empty and this empty, so that I can control the landing gear better. Now, if you just opened up a blend file that had animations in it, you imported a DNM, and you saw this dashed line, you're like, well, what is that? That is the indication of a parent-child relationship, and you can tell them apart by this simple little test. If I select this guy and I can move it without moving the other one, this guy right here is the child. If I selected the other one and can move both, that one's the parent. So the way I just did this, I just selected that guy, this guy, Control P, make parent, and you can see the dashed line went in. Our little test to make sure it works, and there we go. Now, one of the cool things about doing this is if we hit the up key, notice that our animations happened right there. They didn't snap back to their original locations. That's one of the great things about having our empties and making it like this. So I hope you guys found this useful. There is one last thing that I want to talk to you about, and that is scratch making animations. Now you may think, well, Decaf, you just showed us how to do them right here. I only showed you the mechanics of how to do it, but if I exported this DNM file right now, there would be 0 animations in it. And the reason is something that I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on, but I have found out how you can scratch make your animations, and this is actually a very interesting thing. In DNM Viewer, you have to open it up and import each individual SRF and then make your model. In Blender, you can make your model do whatever you want, but then as soon as you're ready to animate, what you have to do is have a seeder animation there. And what I mean by seeder animation is like if you took a full airline or something like that, and you only took one animation, say the landing gear. You deleted everything except the landing gear coming down. Saved that as your start file or something like that. Then went ahead and took all the meshes from here, each one of these guys, and then imported that from you export it from this file as an SRF, import it into your start file as an SRF, and then animate it in there. It'll work. Now, if you're on a Mac and you don't have D&M Viewer or access to a Windows machine, I will be posting a video about how you can get a semi-functional copy of D&M Viewer running natively on your computer. If you are on a Windows machine or you have access to D&M Viewer on Linux or something like that, you can go ahead and just open up your D&M file with animations in it, export it from Blender, open it up in D&M Viewer, and test to see if the animations actually work. Rather than trying to make an LST file in your aircraft folders and all sorts of mess like that in YSFlight, you can test it outside of it. And if it works here, it'll work in YSFlight. So that's a great way that you can test these out. Stay tuned for that other video. I'll get that posted sometime in the future. But remember, you have to have that seeder animation to get everything started. One of the things that I recommend you do for that seeder animation is propellers, because quite frankly, they're kind of hard to animate inside of Blender. So just having a propeller that you can then add, modify, do whatever you need to do for your mesh to look right for your model, you can use that. That's just what I've been doing as an example. So if you have any questions, go ahead and throw me a comment down below. I'm sure you're going to have lots of them. Don't be afraid. Ask away. It's going to be how you learn. Play around with this. Fiddle around. Don't be afraid to waste hours and hours on this, figuring out each little minutia thing. It's going to really add to your understanding of animating and modeling and scratch modeling and all that good stuff. So until next time, have fun and get practicing.